The lawyer's office smelled like old mahogany and expensive lies. I sat across from my son, Daniel, watching him fumble with papers he clearly didn't want me to see. And I thought about that night 3 weeks ago. The night I climbed those attic stairs and discovered a room that shouldn't exist. A room designed to erase me. My name is Margaret. I'm 62 years old, a retired high school English teacher from Charleston. And until that Tuesday evening, I believed my family loved me. What I didn't know was that my entire life had become someone's carefully orchestrated plan. By the time I uncovered the truth, I would be standing in this office, deciding whether to destroy my own son or save myself. Let me be straight with you. The way YouTube works, if you're not subscribed and actively commenting, the platform won't show you the rest of this story. This isn't clickbait. This is me telling you that the next 20 minutes contain revelations that will genuinely shock you. About family, about trust, about the darkness that can hide behind a grandchild's smile. So subscribe now. Comment your city below. Not because I'm asking, but because you'll want to see how this ends. Because what I found in that attic, it wasn't just a room. It was evidence of a conspiracy that had been growing in my own home for 18 months. So let me take you back to where it started. To the moment I should have seen the truth, but chose to look away instead. It was a Thursday afternoon when I heard it. I'd been living in Daniel's house for 2 years, ever since my husband Thomas died, and the loneliness of our old Victorian became unbearable. Daniel had insisted, "Mom, we've got plenty of space. Jacob would love having his grandmother around." His wife Rachel had smiled tightly, but she'd nodded. Their house in the historic district had 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, and that attic, the one I'd never been allowed to enter because of structural issues Daniel kept promising to fix. I was walking past 7-year-old Jacob's room carrying laundry when I heard his small voice through the cracked door. "You won't let Grandma go up to the attic, right, Daddy?" My hands froze on the laundry basket. Something in his tone made my skin prickle. Not playfulness, but genuine fear. "Of course not, buddy." Daniel's voice was smooth, practiced. "The attic's not safe. You know that. But what if she goes when we're sleeping? What if she finds—" "She won't. I promise. Now let's read. Another chapter, okay?" I stood in that hallway for 5 full minutes, my heart hammering against my ribs. The floorboards beneath my feet were original hardwood, installed in 1887, and they creaked with the weight of secrets the house had kept for over a century. What was in the attic? And why would my grandson be scared of me finding it? That night, I lay in my first-floor bedroom, the one that had been Daniel's home office before I moved in, and listened to the house settle. At midnight, I heard Daniel and Rachel's bedroom door close. At 12:30, Jacob's nightlight clicked off. At 1 a.m., I made my decision. The attic stairs were hidden behind a door in the upstairs hallway, next to the linen closet. Daniel had told me the door was locked, that he'd lost the key years ago. But when I turned the brass handle that night, it opened smoothly, silently, as if someone had recently oiled the hinges. The stairs were steep and narrow. I climbed them slowly, my phone's flashlight, cutting through darkness that felt thick, deliberate. At the top, I found another door, this one newer, with a deadbolt that was unlocked. I pushed it open. The room beyond stole my breath. It was large, spanning most of the attic's length, with sloped ceilings and exposed beams. But what made me gasp wasn't the space. It was what filled it. The far wall was covered in photographs of me. Not family photos, surveillance photos. Me leaving the grocery store. Me at my book club. Me walking through Waterfront Park, feeding the ducks I visited every Wednesday. Some were printed on regular paper, pinned to the wall with red thumbtacks. Others were blown up to poster size. On the left side of the room stood a dresser I'd thought I donated to Goodwill 3 years ago. I walked over, my legs shaking, and opened the top drawer. Inside were clothes I'd been searching for. My favorite blue cardigan, the silk scarf Thomas gave me for our 30th anniversary, a pair of slippers I'd assumed I'd misplaced, all neatly folded, as if someone was curating a collection. But the center of the room made everything else seem like decoration. There was a desk, Daniel's old desk from his college apartment, with papers spread across its surface. I approached it like it might explode. The largest document was impossible to miss, a petition for guardianship and conservatorship, filled out in Daniel's precise handwriting. My name was listed as the incapacitated person. There were checkboxes next to I, phrases like unable to manage personal affairs, danger to self, and advanced cognitive decline. None of it was true. Next to the petition sat a calendar, one of those large desk calendars with boxes for each day. Several dates were circled in red ink. I picked it up with trembling hands. October 15th. Doctor's appointment. Dr. Morrison will document confusion. November 3rd. Legal consultation. Bring evidence. November 20th. Court date. File petition. Today was November 1st. I stood in that room for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. My mind was racing, trying to understand. Why would Daniel do this? Why would he need me declared incapacitated? Then I saw the folder at the edge of the desk, a bank folder from Charleston First National. Inside were statements for an account I'd thought was closed, my savings account, the one Thomas and I had built over 40 years of teaching, the one that had $340,000 in it the last time I'd checked, 3 years ago. According to these statements, it had $127,000 left, and every withdrawal was signed by Daniel, under power of attorney I'd given him after Thomas died, when I was grieving and overwhelmed and trusted my son to help manage the estate. My chest felt tight. The room started spinning. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself, and that's when I noticed the smaller document underneath the bank statements. It was a real estate listing. For my old house, the Victorian where I'd raised Daniel, where Thomas Yaum had died, where every room held 40 years of memories. Sold was stamped across the top in red ink. Sale date, September 12th. 3 months ago. Daniel had sold my house without telling me. I heard a sound behind me, the creak of the attic stairs, and turned to see Rachel standing in the doorway. She was wearing a silk robe, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. For a moment, we just stared at each other. "You weren't supposed to find this," she said quietly. "What is this?" My voice came, outbroken. "What are you doing?" Rachel stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "It's not what you think, Margaret." "Then explain it to me. Explain why there are pictures of me on the wall. Explain why my clothes are in that dresser. Explain why my son is trying to have me declared incompetent." She sighed, and I saw something in her face I'd never noticed before. Calculation. Cold, careful calculation. Daniel didn't want to do this, but we don't have a choice. A choice about what? Your money, your house. Daniel's firm is collapsing. He made some bad investments, took out loans he can't repay. We're drowning, Margaret. We're losing everything. I felt like I was underwater, trying to understand words that didn't make sense. "So you're stealing from me? You're trying to have me locked away so you can..." "What? Take everything?" "Not locked away." Rachel's voice was patient, like she was explaining something to a child. "Just managed. The Dr. Daniel's been taking. You two, Dr. Morrison, he's agreed to sign off on your cognitive decline. A few more appointments, a few more incidents that Daniel can document, and the court will approve the guardianship. You'll still live here. You'll still be part of the family. We'll just handle your finances. I don't have cognitive decline. There's nothing wrong with me. The court will believe what the doctors tell them, what Daniel tells them. She paused. You know how persuasive your son can be. I thought about all the times in the past 6 months when Daniel had corrected me in public. Mom, we talked about this yesterday, remember? When we hadn't. Mom, you're confused again. When I wasn't. He'd been building a case, manufacturing evidence of incompetence that didn't exist. And if I tell someone? I asked. If I go to the police? Rachel smiled, a sad, pitying smile that made my blood run cold. Who's going to believe you? A 62-year-old widow living in her son's house, making wild accusations about conspiracy and theft, especially after your son presents documentation of your declining mental state. You'll sound paranoid, delusional. You'll prove his case for him. She was right. That's what made it so terrifying. She was absolutely right. There's another option, Rachel said softly. You sign the power of attorney extension. You agree to the guardianship voluntarily. We tell the court you understand your limitations and you want Daniel to help. It looks better that way. More dignified. And you can stay here. With us. With Jacob. You can keep being a grandmother. Or what? Or Daniel files the petition anyway, and it gets ugly. He'll present evidence you're not just declining, but potentially dangerous. That incident last month when you left the stove on? He documented it. That time you got lost driving home from the library? He has a police report. You'll fight it in court and lose, and then you'll have no control at all. I realized she was giving me a choice between 2 kinds of prison. One with bars I could see, and one with bars I couldn't. I left the attic that night without saying another word. I went downstairs to my bedroom, packed a small bag, and at 3 a.m, I walked out of my son's house for the last time. I drove to a motel on Folly Beach, paid cash for a week, and spent the next 5 days planning. I documented everything. I photographed the attic room, the bank statements, the guardianship petition. I called an attorney, not one of Daniel's colleagues, but a woman named Claire Martinez who specialized in elder abuse. I showed her everything. This is criminal, she said, her voice tight with anger. This is financial exploitation, possible fraud, conspiracy. Your son could go to prison for this. I don't want him in prison, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, despite the betrayal that felt like a knife between my ribs, he was still my son. I want my money back. I want control of my life. And I want him to know I'm not the weak, confused old woman he thought he could erase. That's how I ended up in this lawyer's office 3 weeks later, watching Daniel's face drain of color as Claire laid out the evidence on the conference table between us. Your mother has every legal right to pursue criminal charges, Claire said. What you've done constitutes financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, conspiracy to commit fraud, and possibly forgery if you signed any documents in her name. The district attorney would be very interested in this case. Daniel's hands were shaking. He couldn't look at me. Mom, I'm sorry. I was desperate. The firm... Don't. My voice cut through his excuse like glass. Don't you dare use your failures as justification for trying to destroy me. You were supposed to protect me. You were supposed to love me. I do love you. No, you loved my money. There's a difference. Rachel wasn't there. According to Daniel, she'd taken Jacob and gone to her mother's house in Savannah when she found out I'd hired a lawyer. She'd known this day would come. She'd just hoped it would come after they'd secured control of my assets. The settlement we reached was simple. Daniel would return every penny he'd taken, plus interest. He would transfer back ownership of my house, which thankfully hadn't closed yet due to some title issues. He would resign as my power of attorney, and I would appoint Claire as my new legal representative. And in exchange, I wouldn't press charges. But there was one more thing I required. I want a relationship with my grandson, I said. Not supervised visits at your convenience. Real time. Real connection. He's 7 years old, and he shouldn't have been part of your scheme. He shouldn't have been scared. I want to make sure he knows his grandmother isn't someone to fear. She's someone who fought back. Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. Okay. Yes. Whatever you want. 6 months later, I'm living back in my Victorian house, the one I should never have left. I've hired a contractor to finally fix the things Thomas always meant to repair. The leaky roof, the cracked foundation, the loose boards on the front porch. The house is coming back to life. And so am I. Jacob visits every Saturday. At first he was nervous, confused about why he couldn't see me at his house anymore. But slowly, he's opening up. Last week he told me he'd been scared that night I overheard him talking to Daniel. Daddy said you might get hurt if you went up to the attic, he explained. He said the floor was weak and you could fall through. He said I had to help keep you safe. That's how Daniel had explained it to him. Not as a conspiracy, but as protection. Jacob didn't know about the room, the photos, the documents. He just knew his grandmother was in danger, and he had to help. I held my grandson's hand and told him the truth, an age-appropriate version anyway. I told him that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, even big mistakes, but that doesn't mean we stop loving them. It just means we have to be smarter about who we trust. Daniel and I talk occasionally now. Short, careful conversations that dance around what happened. Rachel has filed for divorce. She's trying to paint herself as a victim, someone who was manipulated by Daniel's desperation. Maybe that's partly true. Maybe they both convinced each other that what they were doing was justified, necessary, not really theft, because eventually the money would have been Daniel's anyway. But it was theft, and it was betrayal. And some days I'm still so angry I can barely breathe. Other days I'm grateful. Grateful I climbed those stairs. Grateful I trusted my instincts. Grateful I found Claire, who believed me when I had every reason to think no one would. I'm teaching again. Not at the high school, but at the community college. A creative writing class for adults who always wanted to write but never had the chance. My students are brilliant and damaged and hopeful, and they remind me that it's never too late to reclaim your own story. Yesterday, one of them asked me why I chose to teach this particular class. I thought about telling her the sanitized version, the one about loving literature and wanting to give back. Instead, I told her the truth. Because for a while, someone tried to write my ending for me, I said. They tried to decide who I was, what I was capable of, how my story should conclude. And I refused to let them. Your story is yours and no one. Not your family, not your circumstances, not the voice in your head that says you're too old or too broken or too late. Gets to write your ending, but you. She smiled, and I saw understanding in her eyes. We all have attics, I realized. Rooms in our lives where people store their versions of who we should be, complete with documentation and photographs and carefully marked calendars. The question isn't whether those rooms exist. It's whether we're brave enough to climb the stairs and see what's hidden there, and whether we're strong enough to burn it all down and start over. My house smells like lemon polish and fresh paint and possibility. The garden Thomas planted is overgrown, but I'm learning to tend it. Jacob helped me plant tulip bulbs last week. They'll bloom in spring, in colors we can't predict yet. That's enough for now. That's more than enough.